Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 40 of Matt Chat. I am Melissa Ross, your mindset coach with Rise to Wellness. Thank you for joining us tonight. We're going to invite some friends on for this episode 40. Today we are talking about carrying your baggage, unpacking your baggage. Do you unpack your baggage? And we'll talk about what baggage we mean in a minute. Or do you carry your baggage or your luggage from one relationship to the next? Think about that for a moment. Stop and think about that for a moment. What do we mean by baggage? And do you carry that baggage from one relationship to the next? Or do you unpack it in between? I'd hazard a guess that lots of us carrying it from one relationship to the next. And what I want to talk about tonight is how that baggage can affect different types of relationships. Emilio says hello from New Jersey. Hello, my friend Emilio. I hope you're well tonight, and I hope say hello to Daniela for me as well. I hope you're well. So we're talking about baggage. Do you unpack your baggage in between relationships, or do you carry that baggage from relationship to relationship? And we're not just talking about romantic relationships. We're talking about friendships. We're talking about family relationships. It could be brother-sister. It could be parent-child relationships. Do you carry that baggage from one relationship to the next? So what I want to talk about today is how that baggage can affect different types of relationships. Gary is watching. Welcome, Gary. I want to talk about how that baggage can affect different types of relationships, and I'm going to give you an example. When I was young, my parents split up. I was quite young. I was maybe about 10 years old at the time, and I distinctly recall at the age of 10 years old having a conversation with my father. And you're welcome, Gary. Gary says thank you. I distinctly recall having a conversation with my father at that young age as he was leaving on a business trip. And I was crying, and I asked him not to leave on the business trip. For some reason inside of me, I felt like something was wrong, something was off, and I begged him not to go on the business trip. And I mean, he was a parent. I mean, he had responsibilities, and he had to go. And Gary says, same here, 10 years of age, yeah. And we're going to talk about how that stuff affects us, Gary. That's what we're talking about tonight. So I begged my dad not to go. I was crying, and he had to go. He was on this business trip. Daniela sends her best. Thank you, Emilio. Thank you, Daniela. And so my dad left. Well, I was in tears, and I remember him leaving and leaving the house, but I also remember him coming back a few days later and sitting us down and having the conversation that he didn't actually go on a business trip. He went to a hotel, and my parents were splitting up. And at the time, I didn't really realize what I knew, what those feelings I had and what I could sense. And Gary says his father never came back. I'm sorry to hear that, Gary. I mean, I was lucky to have my father still in my life. My parents split up at that time, and at 10 years old, I was aware that something was wrong, something was up, and something wasn't right. And I carried that memory with me through other relationships, most prominently through romantic relationships throughout my life as I grew. And I distinctly remember saying to many men in relationships after that, that's okay, all men leave. And I would say it in such a playful way, in such a just nonchalant way, and not realize where it actually came from, where the root of it was. And the root of it wasn't in a romantic relationship. The root of it was in a father-child relationship, right? And that feeling of being abandoned and having my dad leave and standing there crying and begging him to stay, that's where the root of those feelings were. But I took those feelings into romantic relationships as I grew and passively just joked, oh, that's okay, all men leave. Yeah, no big deal, everybody leaves. And joked about it and laughed about it that everybody leaves. But as I got older and as I did the inner work, Gary says, true, we take those things with us. And as I got older and I did the inner work and I started to clear my fears and clear my blockages and do all of that inner work, I came to learn that all men don't leave. And because I had that deep-seated belief that I couldn't be loved and that I would be left and that that would happen to me again, I pushed those men away. I made that come true. I manifested that, and I did things to push those men away so that they would leave. I made that a reality. And even if they were amazing men, amazing people, amazing relationships, amazing friends, whatever that relationship was, I found a way to sabotage it and to push those people away because everybody leaves. I had that deep-seated belief that everybody that loves you leaves. And that was from a young age, from the age of 10 years old. So how many of us, friends, who am I know there's tons of people that I'm talking to out there that this has happened in some form or some way to you, whether it was a romantic relationship or whether it was a parent-child relationship. Gary says my ex did that to me, and we can see that, Gary. We can see that happening, and not only can we see that from the other side, possibly the man on the other side of me would see that I was pushing him away and doing things to deliberately push him away, but I eventually realized that I was doing that too because of that deep-seated belief from being a young age of 10. Nicholas says, hello from Salt Lake City. Hello, Nicholas. Nicholas is in Utah. Gary says, based on her father leaving her. Yes, exactly, Gary. And I was doing the same. And I would joke about it. I would say, oh, that's okay. Everybody leaves. All men leave, right? And until I did that inner work, I didn't realize that that's what I was doing. Nicholas says me too. I didn't realize that that's what I was doing with that deep-seated belief. I was carrying my baggage. I wasn't unpacking the baggage. And it didn't matter that it didn't come from a romantic relationship to begin with. It came from a parent-child relationship, but I was carrying it into romantic relationships as time went on. And I carried that for a long time. Kim's watching. Hello, Kim. And Nicholas says hello. I was carrying that baggage for a long time, and when I finally realized that, I was finally able to start and sit and work with that. And it's taken a long time. It's a really hard one to let go of when you have that belief from such a young age. It's a hard one to work through. It's a hard belief to let go of. But I'll tell you, I got to the point where if I started the pushing, I could tell a partner, this is a belief that I have, this is a belief that I'm working through, and I could basically warn that partner that I'm working through that, and I may push you, I may try to push you away, I may sabotage it, I may come up with something, and I may try that, and I'm trying to work through this, right? It's something that I'm working through. And when you find a strong enough partner, whether it's male or female, when you find a strong enough partner that can understand that and see that in you, Ryan's watching, welcome Ryan. When you find a strong enough partner that can see that and can recognize that in you, then that partner can help you work through that as well. And Gary says that's a good start. And it is because, I mean, it's such a hard, like when you've got that deep-seated belief from childhood, it's such a hard thing to work through. And that's just an example of a belief that we can have. But I mean, there could be tons of different beliefs that we have from childhood. There could be beliefs about weight, beliefs about being lovable, beliefs about being worthy of things, beliefs about there being enough food on the table or being enough, having enough abundance, financial abundance. There could be so many different beliefs that are deep-seated from our childhood that we're carrying on into other relationships, and they're not necessarily romantic relationships. We could be carrying those into friendships. We could be carrying those into employee-employer relationships and carrying those into our work and into our jobs. But it's really important to recognize those things and really start to unpack the baggage and work through the baggage. Gary says, I tried for 3 years and 10 breakoffs. Finally, enough was enough. I know, Gary, and it's sad. I'm sorry that you went through all of that, Gary, and I can see that you tried so hard to help her through that and help her break through that. But we also have to realize when we're on the other side of that is that that person can't change if they don't want to change, if they can't recognize it and they don't want to change. So we can't beat ourselves up about that. If that person isn't recognizing it and wanting to change and wanting to grow through it and wanting to unpack the baggage and work through it, we can't force that. And it's unfortunate and it's sad sometimes. But sometimes that's a reality, that people aren't just not in a place to work through that and aren't willing to see it. They keep shoving it down, and we've talked about how we shove down our feelings and we shove them and shove them and shove them until they become a jack in the box, and all of a sudden they all explode out of us, and we explode with all of those feelings and those emotions because we keep shoving them down and we're not facing them head on. And Gary says exactly, yeah. And we're not facing those things head on. And sometimes we can all be in that state sometimes, depending on what it is. And Gary says we're not able to process it or change it. And that's the thing. Sometimes we don't recognize it, or we're not willing to recognize it. Sometimes we recognize it, but we're not willing to do the work to change it, or we're not able to do the work to process it. You're right, Gary. And we're all in different stages. I'm the type of person that I want to work on those things, and I'm constantly working on myself and learning new skills and becoming a better person, becoming a better version of myself, and taking courses and working with mentors and working with coaches to really work through all of those things. And I'll tell you, I just said to someone the other day, the biggest one that I still work through is that deep-seated belief that everybody leaves. And I mean, because it's been there for so long. It's been there since I was 10 years old, and I'm aware of it, and I can work with it now, and there are strategies that I can use, and there are things that I can do to face it head on and to journal through it and work through the emotions that come up and check myself. Sit back. Nicole is watching. Thanks for joining us, Nicole. I can sit back and I can check myself and say, okay, is this reality, or are you sabotaging this because of that deep-seated belief? So it's really important for us to recognize those things, recognize where our baggage is, and recognize, are we carrying that baggage from relationship to relationship, or are we taking the time to really sit with it and unpack it and learn what it is and learn to grow through it and learn to overcome that baggage, whatever that baggage is, whatever those deep-seated fears or beliefs are. Are we really sitting with it and confronting it head on and working through it? And that doesn't mean that all of a sudden, we think about it today and we confront it today and tomorrow we're healed. Sometimes it takes a really long time, just like I'm talking about that deep-seated belief from when I was 10 years old. Sometimes it takes a really long time to work through those things and really notice what we're doing and notice the emotions behind it and notice what our auto reactions are, because those are really automatic reactions when those things have been happening to us for so long. And Nicholas says it happens to me too. I think it happens to all of us, Nicholas. I think I'm talking to everybody out there when we talk about this. Yes, all relationships, Nicholas. It's not just romantic relationships. It could happen to us. We could carry those beliefs and those fears into employer-employee relationships, into friendships, into parent-child relationships even. I mean, if we've experienced those things as at a young age, then we parent that way, right? Because that's what we've learned and that's what we've grown with, and we parent that way. So sometimes those things come out as a parent to our own children, and we have to sit back and unpack that baggage and work through it and figure out how to change reality, change the course of our parenting and adjust from how we were parented or how those things happen to us as kids. Because it doesn't always mean that I mean, we had bad parents or we were parented bad. It's just the circumstances that happened. I wasn't parented horribly. I had that deep-seated belief that everybody leaves because my parents split up. I mean, and that was between them. It had nothing to do with me. Absolutely nothing to do with me. But the memory that I have of that, and it took me a long time to come up with this too, to really sit with the memory. I've done a lot of hypnosis work. I've done a lot of NLP work with mentors to really sit with that and really visualize that, to figure out what age I was and what the memory was. And now I know that it came, the memory of standing there as a 10-year-old in front of my dad crying and begging him not to leave on this business trip, and then finding out a few days later that there was no business trip, that my parents were actually splitting and he was leaving for good and not moving back in. I mean, he was in my life still, but not coming back to live with us and be with us. And it took a long time to really unpack that that's where that deep-seated belief came from, and that's where it started. So sometimes it's big work, it's long work, friends, and it really takes time to unpack it and deal with it and grow with it head on and be able to change it. Hema is watching. Welcome. Hope you're well tonight. So that's what we're after tonight, friends. My question to you is, are you unpacking the baggage? Gary says, are you clear of that now? Yes, thank you for asking that, Gary. That is a great question. I've been working on that for a long time, and I'll tell you that I am in a new relationship, and it's something that I talk about in relationships. And so it is something that we discuss and that we talk about, and I would say that I'm aware of it now, Gary, and I can stop it from ruining a relationship at this point. I'm aware of it. Sometimes it still comes up for me, and I'm able to voice that that's what's coming up for me, and I can stop it from ruining the relationship. And my partner can help me to stop it from ruining the relationship, because I've done that work. Gary says amen to that. Yes, amen to that, my friend. So I'm aware of it to the point where I can stop it from ruining a relationship, and it's something that I still work on, because my goal is to get to the point where it doesn't come up for me anymore. But I'm very honest in a relationship about the fact that that is still a belief that I work on, that I do a lot of work around, and that is there for me, that is present for me, and that I'm controlling it. I'm able to not have it take over for me in a relationship. So thank you. That was a wonderful question, Gary, and that demonstrates to you how long. I won't tell you my age, Gary, but it demonstrates to you how long sometimes it takes for us to really realize the root cause of that baggage and unpack it and really work with it, and really the practice that it takes to be aware of it and ensure that it doesn't ruin our relationships. And like I say again, not just romantic relationships. It could be any relationship. It could be employer-employee relationships. It could be friendships. It could be any kind of relationship, the parent-child relationship. I think as parents, we carry a lot of those things with us. Gary says, I won't tell you mine either. All right. Age. I know what you were talking about, Gary. All right. I won't ask, Gary. We'll just keep that a little secret. We'll lock that one away. So I think as parents, we carry a lot of baggage around with us from our childhood that we tend to carry on with our children and gift, so to speak, to our children. So I think it's really important that we watch that baggage and unpack that baggage as well, and really make sure that we're parenting our children in a different way if we carry baggage from our childhood as well, and if we carry it from that same kind of relationship. So that is Matt Chat for tonight. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. This topic has touched me this week, and I was really excited to talk about that today. And I invite you all this week, in between Matt Chats, in between videos, I invite you all this week, for the next week, to really sit down and figure out whether you're unpacking your baggage. Are you unpacking it and dealing with it and confronting it head on? Or are you carrying your baggage from one relationship to the next? Neil says, smart girl. Thank you, Neil. Gary says, thank you. Thank you for being here, everyone. I wish you all a wonderful night. This has been episode 40 of Matt Chat. And I invite you all to spend the next week really sitting down with your luggage and making sure you're unpacking it in between relationships. Have a wonderful night, my friends. Take care.